Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I am talking to, how do you say this? Oz Du Soleil?
Du Soleil. Yep.
Du Soleil, who is on fire with Excel. So his YouTube channel is called, what, Excel on
Excel
Fire?
Excel on fire. That's right.
So go ahead and check out that YouTube channel. It is just chock full of nuggets of gold in terms of learning all about Excel. And the focus that we were going to talk about today was thinking like an analyst. Yes, Oz is like a expert on Excel, but we're going to talk about that for sure. But we're also going to talk about how to think like an analyst. So Oz, I'll kick it off to you. How do you do that? How do you think like an analyst?
Man, that can be so big, and there's all types of analysis and how to think. But the big thing that comes to mind for me is when I was a commissions analyst and developing a relationship with the data and recognizing when the data looks funny and being curious to find out is just is this is what it is, or is something fishy? And a lot of times I did find fishy stuff, reports that were wrong, reports that didn't match the compensation plan, or rules in reports that made sense 10 years ago, but the company has grown and gotten more complex. And now finally I have hit on a scenario that triggered something weird in the report. So, and then also, this is interesting because I was talking with somebody who said he's got a team of top analysts, but they're not curious. When numbers look funny, they aren't recognizing that they look funny. They just keep on going and they do their analysis, they do their forecast, and they send out their reports. And then he comes back later and says, didn't somebody recognize that this looked funny? And then when you go back to it, then you find out, like I did one time, the director of billing had written off a whole bunch of bad debts.
Oh,
And that was not supposed to show up in the commission's report. Because the compensation plan said a sales rep can be hit for refunds up to a year in the past, a calendar year.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
nothing in the report that dealt with that. So these 10-year-old debts was suddenly showing up. And what it took was when she took about a week and wrote off a whole bunch of them, that caused a whole bunch of numbers to go down. And that wouldn't happen if she, just wrote off one $500 debt from 10 years ago. That wouldn't trigger anything for me. But when she's writing off hundreds of thousands of dollars and then all of these numbers go low, then I gotta say, what the hell is going on here?
I really like that you mentioned curiosity. So I think it was in our third podcast episode, I interviewed a former business partner of mine who's now actually one of my clients. He's the CMO of a local company here in Greensboro. And he says that one of the things that he looks for is curiosity.
Yeah.
Not just with analysts, but just with anyone that he hires. Because if
Hmm.
you're not curious or you're not actively engaged, then that's when you really start to run into some trouble.
Hmm. Hmm. And what kind of trouble do you say, or what's an example of running into trouble?
Hmm. Putting me on the spot here. I'm trying to think of like a really good example of, oh, here's one. Like when you have duplicate entries,
Hmm.
and if you're not actually in the numbers, like you were saying, like before we hit the record button, you were talking about how it's tough to be a consultant because you might work on a project and then 6 months later, they call you back and you've kind of forgotten all the intricacies and the specifics.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you're a full-time analyst and you live in that data and you know it and you built up some of that intuition, then you can start to see like, oh, there's probably a duplication here. Let me do some digging and I can parse that out.
Yeah.
And then now all of a sudden the numbers look right. Because
Yeah.
that is the worst case scenario when you're, reporting to your CEO, CMO, or even your manager. If the data is wrong, then any type of recommendation or insight is just invalidated immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that I think about as an analyst is how much can I trust this data? Always. Don't start making charts and telling people this is what I see and everything. So I sat down with a tutoring student. She came straight from work to meet me. She wanted to know about pivot tables. And she brought her actual work. And immediately I saw a whole bunch of duplicates in her data. And she says, oh my gosh, I just told my bosses what I found with some calculations I did. They're going to be way off because when we go clear out all these duplicates, the numbers are going to be way lower. But right, she was thinking like she's ready to do the analysis. But
right,
what about the data quality?
And I think this gets into data governance, honestly. Like if you can create a data collection system that is somewhat streamlined. So you mentioned ad hoc before we started recording.
Yeah.
Ad hoc has its place, but I really think that you need to get into systems thinking. So how can you build a system, architect it once, and then it's going to run pretty much perfectly unless, some external force comes in and changes that,
Now this is where I disagree with you, Jack,
Oh.
because that's why my Excel skill came to be, because I am one guy sitting in a cubicle having to deal with whatever comes up. And we had this international database and two huge IT teams, and a lot of times my problems are too small for them. I'm trying to deal with 5,000 people. They can't stop and help me help 5,000 people. And weird stuff happens, right? Because, okay, so we set up a portal for a company to go register people, and these people go in and register themselves. Okay, now Allison Fisher sets up an account. Then she comes back later, months later, and sets up Allison Fisher - St. James, now her married name. So now she's got two profiles in the system. And then maybe an admin comes in and makes a third profile for her. How do you control that? And how do you control it in a way to where it doesn't annoy the hell out of people? Right? Because
that's like some systems design.
Yeah. And then somebody calls up on behalf of Allison Fisher. So all these weird ways that data can get into the system and mess it up. So you can systematize things up to a point.
Right. Yeah. I feel like we're not necessarily disagreeing. I think we're kind of saying things that are like related. I would say.
Yeah, we're definitely related, and I'm thinking at a certain level. Right. I think we're talking, you definitely need systems. And then there was me sitting in a cubicle dealing with the weird stuff.
Right. Because you also mentioned that a lot of your students reach out to you because they want to save like a whole day of their work week. That's systems thinking, because then that gets into scalability. Yeah. So you craft that system, and there are going to be imperfections. But it's kind of like that Pareto analysis of like, I can get 80% of it done perfectly. Then I can spend that 20%, some time on that 20%,
Yeah. And that man, you saying some sexy stuff here because one thing is determining how much crappy data is acceptable, because it is never going to be 100% clean. Right. But you got to decide the stakes, what's at stake? What is it going to take to get to 85% clean, 90% clean, 98% clean? But then there is, yes, coming up with a system, thinking about how can I simplify things. So I had somebody who was just retyping names. He would get this list of names that he had to make certificates for. And some names are coming in, they're all lowercase, some are all uppercase, some are just wrong. And so he's retyping them one at a time instead of, using the proper function.
That's like the biggest sin of data governance. Manually typing things, human error is so bad. That's something I tell a lot of my clients is that, for example, one of my clients that I currently am consulting with, they were working on Salesforce data. And when I first showed up, they were manually typing in industry. Guess how many industries showed up when I first walked in the door?
How many?
There was like 56. What we did was we then grouped them all together, and I sat down with their director in that department, and we whittled it down to there really 8. And there might be 56 subcategories, but that doesn't make sense in terms of, well, this is a cluster here and this is a cluster, and we can compare. This cluster has got a lot more sales going on than this one. So we should spend our marketing and sales efforts trying to grow this. Because this is already working and it's resonating and there's like a deep market there. And
Right.
I mean, eventually you're going to hit a threshold where you're hitting a diminishing return, and maybe you start looking for other clusters to focus. But that's kind of like step 1 in terms of like my sales discovery analysis.
Yeah. So let's trying to think back here. Anyway, let's go forward.
Well, something I wanted to talk to you about too is mentorship. So one of the best ways to improve your like analytical critical thinking is to find someone who is already deep into their area of expertise, and just work with them and see how they think. Not only like what they're thinking, like, oh, this is a good idea, this is a good tactic, like this is what you would do in this exact situation, but more of like I feel like I'm over harping on systems, but like what is their system of thinking? Like how do they kind of, it's like more of a philosophical thing. Like, how do you go about thinking?
So I think of a couple of mentors I had, Monica and then Thomas. And that mentorship was more around the stuff that wasn't in the tool. Yeah, Monica showed me pivot tables and VLOOKUP in Excel. But then there was, when I get called into the controller's office and he's got a question about the data, can I explain how I got to a certain calculation? And don't go in there all mealy-mouthed and worried that he's trying to trap me. If I am confident in the calculation I made that, yeah, you need to pay this person $18,000 this month for their commissions, how did I get there? Well, I took the data and I did this, and based on the compensation plan and the blah, 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 and then this is how I get to 18,000. But don't go in there like, well, I was told that I need to take the data, and I'm sure I did this right. But if I made a mistake, let me know. And then then they start losing confidence, and then want to check everything I'm doing. But then don't try to bull jive anybody either. That's bad also. So that's what my mentors did for me, really. The tool stuff was often the easy part. Dealing with people who don't like their commissions calculation, sending somebody a $3,000 check And they say, what about this and what about that? I need to be able to first not take it personally.
That's a huge one. People take
Yeah,
it's business.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, you are human and you have emotions, but I mean, if you're crying because someone's criticizing or telling you no,
Hmm.
that's extremely unprofessional.
Yeah, and it can be hard. It can be
Oh
hard
yeah, it's
because
true.
because yeah, I don't want to get caught. I haven't made a mistake, and then here's this person asking me something, and what if we start stepping through it, and I say, "Oh yeah, I did screw this up," but so it's a constant thing of not taking this personally, and then also confidently taking this salesperson through the process of how we got to $3,000 and not $5,000, and and then explaining, okay, now I think I see where you got this $5,000 idea, and maybe it's an issue of, yeah, they processed the sale, but then it winds up in the system and it's going to be on next month's, something like that. But
Hmm.
taking them seriously, uh, and not taking it personally, being confident. That was something Thomas kept going back to. You got to be confident. And then when I did make mistakes, I went and told my controller, or told the my director, here's this goof, and um, it's embarrassing. And then to think about being fired, I made a mistake. But then learning that I owned the mistake, I understood what happened. This is what I'm doing to make corrections. So one thing I learned in that regard was about cross-footing.
What's
So I'm
that?
gonna cross-footing is where I will calculate something maybe 3 different ways and see that those 3 different ways all add up to the same thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
So maybe,
interesting.
yeah,
I haven't heard of
maybe
that.
add up all of the uh, product lines, add all of those up, because those are all summarized.
And then
Add
add
up
up all the
the
sales for individual.
transactions.
Right.
Right.
I see what
Right.
you're saying.
Yeah. And then put in certain things into my model that will make it clear some numbers don't add up. Stop. Maybe something turns red or yellow. And
So, would you say that the mentors you've had throughout your career have helped you navigate the like personal relationships,
hmm
or I know you don't like this term, or like the soft skills?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I feel soft skills is kind of gushy, whereas it's not gushy when I have to go to my director and say, I just recognized that the sales commissions report is wrong. This thing that was written 10 years ago is got a serious flaw in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't see it as gushy. I got to get up off my ass and take a hard swallow and go tell the director something is wrong, and I got to reconcile the whole 8 months of this year's worth of commissions.
Yeah, well, I was actually listening to a podcast this morning. Do you know who Robert Greene is?
Mm-mm.
He wrote the 48 Laws of Power, the 50th Law. I think it's like the Art of Human Nature or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
The way that he frames up failure, well, he said he's going to write a new book, and the next topic of his new book is going to be um, you need to see opportunity as a way for you to grow. And he argues that failing is actually more valuable to you in the long run than succeeding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think there's an art to seeing. So what you just laid out, for example. So you said, I found this, there's an error in this report. I see that as an opportunity. That's an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity for you to show up to that manager and say, hey, look, I found a problem in your operation and I fixed it for you.
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's, it does seem like, yeah, you may get some backlash on like, look, the analysis is wrong, but I think you can kind of, it's a way for you to build trust in that relationship.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. And I definitely built a lot of trust in what I
Right.
did. Yeah.
Because yeah, it's like the confidence and the trust thing, they're very much interrelated in that people tend to trust confident people. If you say
Mm-hmm.
something with, a deep voice,
Mm-hmm.
for example, like, here are the sales figures versus here are the sales figures, like
Mm-hmm.
even the tonality of your voice
Yeah. Yeah.
conveys confidence,
Yeah.
then that opens up, a lot of opportunity for you in
Yeah.
terms of like, not only are you not going to be nitpicked and questioned and micromanaged, although
Mm-hmm.
I've been in the corporate environment where no matter how confident I was still nitpicked. It's just
Mm-hmm.
some positions
Yeah.
aren't the greatest.
Yeah.
But if you have that confidence and back that up with actually executing on
Mm-hmm.
point, that's when you can start to level up your career and
Yeah.
start moving on to like, bigger and greener pastures.
Yeah. And that's interesting. You mentioned so there's I just want to add in that you can't BS somebody. They
Right.
put on that confidence, and constantly there's mistakes found in your work, but you're still confident and tap dancing. It was, yeah, it was wrong, but it's still kind of right because it's not my fault. It's no.
There's a word for that. It's called delusional.
Okay.
Because then people are just like, oh, you live in your own reality and it has no basis in what's going on over here.
Yeah,
Um,
and then there's called being a bullshitter.
yeah.
There's
I would
there's being
I
a
would say that's
bullshitter.
I would say that's even worse because like
Yes,
the
yes,
delusional people think that they're doing well and they're just like
yes,
off base.
yes,
Then you're kind of like that slimy, sleazy,
yeah,
people are like, I gotta watch out for this guy.
yes. Um, then you said something else that was interesting. Um, that confidence and trust that okay, they eventually did something to highly automate the commissions calculations process and made it somebody else's side job. But I had shown the skill, but also the confidence and the ownership of things. They created a position for me rather than just let me go. And
Yeah.
that taught me a lot of other stuff. And I'll tell you, director confided in me one day. He said he was supposed to fire me when he showed up
Oh,
because I had shown myself as difficult. But when he showed up, he saw that I was going to fight for the customers because I was in customer service. I'm supposed to answer the phones.
mhm.
But I was getting up and going solving problems. What's wrong here? And then I go find out the problem is in the data, or the problem is in the reports, or the problem is in a slow process. So I am trying to get it to where, somebody calls up and the first thing they say is, I've called 3 times about this. Okay, there is not going to be another call about this because I'm going to solve it. The initial director, he didn't like that. Oz is being difficult. But the next one, he saw that I had a skill and I was solving problems. And then he started giving me different types of problems to solve and slowly got me off of answering the phones.
That's an interesting trajectory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there was one role where people's uh, continuing education coursework wasn't showing up in reports. And an issue was there were 3 different companies that were feeding data in, and it wasn't all matching up. And so I sat and very meticulously tried to figure out how this was working and which types of uh, credits would go through and which ones would get held up and where did they get stuck. So I when that new director saw how meticulous I was in figuring that out, and then the giving a damn, because I could have said, well, these didn't go through and I tried this and these went through and these didn't, but why? What was wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what my director liked.
That curiosity.
Yeah. And take yeah, the curiosity and taking some kind of action.
Yeah. So I do have kind of like a follow-up question to like, what was the value of a mentor? How did you go about meeting mentors? Did you luck into that, or was that like a methodical way that you
I,
cultivated those relationships?
I looked into it. With Thomas, so my commissions analyst job was housed in the accounting department, and I'm not an accountant, never been an accountant. But he saw me a couple cubicles away floundering, and he had been in meetings with me when I'm being all shy about, how I arrived at my calculations. And he would regularly pull me aside and say, okay, you know what you're doing.
Mhm.
I could see if you didn't know what you were doing, but you know what you're doing. Present yourself that way. And if they do find mistakes, that's what this whole process is for. Because once I calculate commissions, it goes to 2 people higher than me before it gets finalized and sent to payroll. So trust the process also. Uh, what else? So much. He told me, about being organized. Um, so many things, but yeah, I'm so appreciative because yeah, I didn't ask for all of this.
So you attracted him essentially
Yeah,
is what
yeah,
happened, because you were doing good work and he could see that, but he could
yeah,
also see that you were a little timid. You weren't quite confident enough.
yeah.
Because I've actually been thinking about this question quite a bit, because I've had 3 pretty big mentors within the last 3 years, and one of them I just recently met, and
Mhm,
it's funny because I hesitate to call them mentors because they end up partnering with me in my businesses.
mhm,
Um, but the one that I recently found, or actually he found me through, Greensboro is kind of a small place. So he, my new mentor, his name's Nathan. He is the former CFO of Wrangler Jeans.
wow.
And he's retired from that, or moved on from that opportunity, and now he has his own consulting agency, and he reached out to me so that we could partner on some Power BI projects, because he's doing all the financial analysis and he wants me to come in and visualize it. Unfortunately, what happened, the project that we were going to collaborate on, got pushed back 6 months, and I
Mhm,
was like, oh man, that's probably not good news, because if it probably will come through, but there's a chance that it won't now. you know
mhm,
what I did to continue to foster that relationship was I sit on the board of directors of a local nonprofit, and I'm the treasurer. So I asked him if he'd be interested in coming on the board of directors and helping me, really go through the books and, go through the financials and see where the opportunities are. So
mhm.
now I'm not only do I have a mentor, but I'm seeing how he thinks. He was the CFO for 5 years at I don't know how big Ringler is. I think it's probably, you know, maybe a billion. I don't know. It's a huge company.
Mhm.
But now I have like the CFO of this very large company working with me in his area of expertise. So I'm getting to see how he thinks.
Okay.
And now it's also kind of plugging into, one of the things that I'm doing as a board member is I'm creating some financial or economic impact analysis. So I'm helping them quantify their impact in the nonprofit space, um, in order for them to get more funding. So for
Yeah.
the organization to thrive, they're going to need funding so that they can get more resources and have a bigger
Yes.
impact.
Yes.
So that, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a whole conversation into itself. Like
Yeah.
nonprofit space and analysis, that's just a wide open opportunity because most of the people in that space are kind of like, use the word gushy earlier. They're kind of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
they're very much like mission driven, and I want to,
Mm-hmm.
I want to impact the world, and I want to help people. A lot of those
Yeah.
people are not very much analytical thinking,
Right.
like the
And
cross
yes,
section.
yeah, I have spent a lot of time in that space. I founded a nonprofit, um, dealt with a lot of nonprofit people, and um, yeah, analysis and data are lacking.
Right.
And I went to a nonprofit CEO's boot camp over a week, and it's in Chicago, and there was a guy from a foundation, and this guy was as cold as a snake. He seemed like he sold his sense of humor at somewhere early in his life. But the thing he said was, when I'm gonna give a nonprofit $50,000, I don't want pictures that your kids have colored. I don't want cake and all of this and heartwarming stories. I need data.
Right.
I want to see what you've done with money in the past. What is your plan? You know, did you adhere to the application guidelines?
Hmm.
Yeah, and a lot of nonprofits, they aren't prepared for that. They don't have data, or the data is all over the place.
Well, I've heard this about Bill Gates with his foundation, and that the way that he looks at how he's spending his foundation's dollars is they look at return on investment.
Hmm.
So if I spend $1, digging wells in Africa, is that going to affect more people than trying to, malaria medicine in the Amazon?
Hmm.
Like, which has a bigger impact?
Yeah,
So analytics has got, it's such an exciting space because it reaches everything. But you
right,
wouldn't think nonprofits and analytics, there would be a huge crossroads there. But I mean,
right.
data has now become like the new gold.
Yeah, and here again, I think we're talking like two different levels, right? Because you're talking about the analysis and the impact and making a case for funding,
Hmm.
whereas where I've dealt with it is um, the data is just a mess or non-existent or it's all over the place. I tried to help one nonprofit that had data because, okay, in the nonprofit space, I can tell you a warm story and you might reach in your pocket and give me $20. But now I want to apply for a $10,000 or $50,000 grant. A heartwarming story does not work.
Right.
They want data, and that's where this nonprofit had finally gotten to. But now their donor data, their uh, data about their projects, it's on 3 different computers in different versions of Excel, in PDF files, in Word, and they needed to get it all in one place so that then they could do the type of analysis you're talking about.
Hmm.
And they never got there because I said, I'm a volunteer and I can help you cleanse this stuff, but at least get this stuff onto one computer. I went back there twice and they still hadn't done it. And I felt like they were looking for me to do it. And I said, no, I can help
Hmm.
you with deduping and normalization and that kind of stuff. But going through all these files and folders on 3 different computers, no. And so I had to call the agency and tell them I don't think I can help them because they've got to be willing to help me help them.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like it's just not something they want to do.
They want to, and that's the thing is they want to, but it's hard. It's intimidating.
um, yeah, I guess my line of where I was going with that is like, if you really want to do something,
Hmm.
you're going to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
it might take some extra hours.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess there is a case to be made, like, you know, I don't have the tools. I don't have like the intelligence. I feel like this stuff is not really that hard. It takes time, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not like extremely difficult to learn. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, like something I was going to get back to you, going to really relate back was those soft skills, those interpersonal skills. Those are hard to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Learning hard skills, there's 50 courses on any topic
Okay.
that you ever want.
Okay. 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 I'm with you there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But try learning how to sell or close a deal, or,
Mm-hmm.
diffuse someone when they're mad.
Yeah.
That's something that I think a lot of analysts just don't want to deal with.
Yep.
They want, let me learn Power BI, let me learn Excel,
Yeah.
Power Pivot, and I'll just be in this world.
Yeah.
But that's only like a fraction of the value you
Yeah.
actually need to bring.
Yep. And yes, and we that needs to be talked about more, because the tips and tricks and techniques and different tools and things, those are all great, but yeah, not paying attention to the data quality, and then dealing with the people who don't like the results. That's the hard thing. And one thing Thomas helped me with was there was this one sales assistant who over 3 months he kept questioning me, and I would step him through, here's how the calculation went. And Thomas said, there's only so much of that you do. Yes, people will have questions and you step them through, but then after that third month, say, wait a minute, we've gone through this twice and everything has been right. And so now, you're being a jerk.
Right.
Yeah. So
Throw some
you
boundaries up.
yeah, some boundaries. Yes. Take it seriously because this is their money. But then also don't, become somebody's, doormat.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then they're just you're gonna give them an inch and give them an inch, and then it's gonna be a
Yeah.
mile all of a sudden.
Yeah. And what we did, I got my director to step in, and my director and that sales assistant had a meeting, and she told him, look, we're not going to go around in circles with this every month. Now, I showed you how the calculations go, and you get the detailed report. So, stop this. If there's something that you can point to that this looks funny, we're not closing the door on you, but we're not having this dance every month.
Right. So let's move on to something. I guess
Okay.
that's like let's move into something that we can pull out of this for a podcast highlight. Shameless
Okay.
plug here. So you've been teaching and teaching and teaching. You've had so many different students. What are the most common mistakes or misconceptions that entry-level analysts have about the analytic space?
The first thing that came to mind for me is the bashing of Excel.
Ooh, the bashing of Excel. You
Yeah.
know what? The first podcast episode, or I should say the first podcast episode of this month, I was talking about skill building.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I said was you need to start with Excel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like seen as not sexy or I don't know, not high value,
Mm-hmm.
but I learned data science or kind of higher level analytical thinking through Excel in my quantitative analytics course in my MBA program.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hear about all of these different tools and stuff, but Excel is nimble. It does a lot of things. And then with Power Query being available, it does have a lot of database-like features. And, somebody will say, what you're doing should be in a database, but then the reality is a database isn't available, there's a high learning curve, and there needed to be something in Excel that would allow some database-like features, and that's Power Query. But I want to kind of change my answer and say that a lot of now. Let me slow down. I almost said rephrase, like in the booth.
Right.
Yeah. Rephrase. There needs to be more thought about data quality and data cleansing as a skill unto itself. So you got somebody who wants to make the dashboard and do the forecasting, and they see data cleansing as a hassle. But I've spent over 20 years making my money cleansing data, because not everybody needs analysis. They need to take all the data from all of these different sources, get it deduped and normalized so that they can put it in a database. Or a personal chef that I did some work for, she wants to know, she needs to go get 10 heads of garlic to get through the week. That's not forecasting. That's not analysis. A company that delivers food every week, the person packing the vehicle for this one route, he needs 15 pies. That's what he needs. But again, the data is all a mess.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things that I do in my consulting agency is just get the data in front of the decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I mean, a lot of times I'll present it in a Tableau dashboard, but it's not like I'm doing any crazy predictive modeling or,
right.
I mean, there is some interactivity, like they'll be able to drill down based on like the interactive visualizations, but it's almost like you're leading them to water and they're the horse and they're going to drink themselves. You know, like you're just clearing the path so that they can actually get there.
Yeah. But somebody's got to get the data clean. They got to get it all in one place and useful and trustworthy.
So I really like this thread because this is like right in the sweet spot in terms of like how to get an analytics job podcast. What would be the top things if you were a brand new analyst? What in terms of prioritization in the Excel space, what would you learn first, then second, then third, and so on and so forth?
I'll tell you, what would I learn first in the tool?
Right. So I guess the question that I'm kind of trying to get at is, I always like to use this analogy of like, what is the lowest, juiciest hanging fruit? So what like if, and say you only had, 30 hours to learn Excel or, 100 hours, how would you prioritize that time to get that like entry level analytics level of skill and expertise?
For somebody that doesn't know, so, okay, because that's kind of messy for me. Okay, so but let me think about it this way. So I had a friend who got his master's degree in marketing, and he knows all the analytics stuff. And in college, he learned on their expensive software. Then he gets his first job in a small marketing firm, and there's Excel, and he's got no clue.
I like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you advise him moving forward?
Yeah. Sort and filter can take you a long way. Okay. So first there, because you can sort in different levels in Excel. And I think about my early days before I even knew how to write a formula. At least I could look at the data and say, okay, these are similar, but let me get them all in one place. So I'm going to sort 3 levels, and then that's going to put this stuff in one place, and then I can manually move it over and then do it again and get this stuff. So thinking about the data, sorting and filtering, and being able to see patterns and work in patterns.
So you're starting to massage the data with that skill set. So that's
Yeah.
sort and filter. You would say that's the number one place to start.
Yeah.
Where's number two? Where would you go from there?
I
don't want to lead you, but
yeah.
what about the power stuff?
Okay, so that's where I'm thinking number 2 is kind of hard, because I'm thinking about, should pivot tables be second? But that can be a gap, because there is also writing formulas.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that it is powerful to be able to write an if statement, even if it's nested 10 ifs deep.
Mm-hmm.
That can help a person get at what they're looking for.
So I don't actually know if here I am hosting the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast, and I'm not sure. I just don't use if. It's an if-then statement, right?
Well, it's an if function in Excel.
Okay.
Right.
What does that mean?
That means
so if this is met, so say if it's over $10,000, include it in this column.
So like one thing is like deduping something. So I get things sorted by, say, first name and last name.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will say equals if this name equals the name underneath, then put an X. Otherwise, stay blank. Run it down the whole column, and then the X's are names that I need to look at.
Okay.
Right. So if so much stuff is that kind of condition, if a sale is over this number, because that's the minimum for getting commissions on it, then put an X.
Okay.
Okay.
So now you're starting to kind of structure the data.
Right. Ifs can do a whole lot of stuff. So I just think of when I first started working with Excel, I did a hell of a lot with sort, filter, and if, and manually moving stuff around.
Okay, so that's like the easiest. Like if you're, say you're looking to get an analytics job tomorrow, or maybe next week, maybe tomorrow's too fast. You can master those 3 things, and then you're going to be at least basic level proficient.
If you're thinking right, you got to be able to think right and see patterns and see, okay, I need to get these 3 things together, because if I get these, then I can move this out of the way, and then I can see how much real work I've got to do. So it's all kinds of stuff there. But then, and then Excel, from that point, it depends on what you need to do with Excel. Because there are people who need to make charts and dashboards and stuff. That's never been me. So, like 15 years into me working Excel, somebody got on me about not knowing how to make a certain graph. Well, how do you call your experts? Well, I'm an expert at cleansing data, working with data dumps, building tools, and those tools have never needed to have any graphics in them. Right. But some people do need that. So, this kind of reminds me of the question of Oz, teach me Excel. Well, after sort, filter, and if, now we get into what do you need to do with Excel? And when they don't know, then that's kind of hard. And that comes up when people, they'll say, my employer spent $2,000 and sent me to an Excel course, and it was 5 days, and 2 of those days are stuff that I don't need. But, so you teach general Excel, and you teach people about how to make a dual axis graph. And then the person say, I am never going to make a dual axis graph in my life.
It's been my experience that the easiest way to learn is just to take on a new project.
Yes. But then when you mentioned the power stuff, So here's how I've approached this. I've got a weekly challenge that comes out on LinkedIn every Friday morning.
Mm-hmm.
And so through that weekly challenge, I introduce Power Query and different tools in Power Query. And it's through the real world challenges, because that's what I draw from. There is no standalone, just conceptual stuff. I say, okay, we pasted this data in from a web page, and the name is stuck right up against the phone number, and it's structured this way. So one thing we got to do is we got to get it unpivoted, and then we got to get the name separated from the phone number. Okay, we're going to take it into Power Query, and then we're going to use the unpivot feature, and then we're going to split the column by non-digit to digit.
Okay. So
Yeah.
this is Power BI built on top of Power Query? Because I've been in the Tableau space for the past 3 years, but I've recently taken on some projects with Power BI, and they're using, like, there's some database modeling functionality.
Yep.
They call it the query builder now that I'm thinking about it. I'm wondering if it's kind of the same.
Yeah, they're essentially the same. Yeah,
Okay.
the back end.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Because Power BI is extremely powerful.
Yes.
And see, this is where you and I differ in that I'm building, almost the way to frame this up is that I'm building apps that, the CEO, CMO, COO can use to find insights in their own data.
Okay.
That's what an effective dashboard is, essentially.
Okay. Yeah.
So I've gathered the data, and then I've interfaced with them back and forth, saying, what do you care about? Oh, you want to look at industry, you want to look at deal size, you want to look at geography, and you want to make it interactive. And then I mock it up, prototype it, and then implement it, and then upload it to the server, and then they have access to that anytime they want.
Yeah. And that's Power BI. Right. Yeah. And then my main use of Power Query, they've got that same back end. One example is a company that needed low-level alerts. So of these 2,000 products that they make, which ones are at a low level? And I had to bring in data from what their clients were using, what products are on order, what was shipped to their client in the previous week, and what's in the warehouse. So between all of that stuff, and then looking at different levels of the different products. So one product, they can replace those tomorrow. If they get low on these other things, they need 6 months lead time. So they all have different low level amounts. So now I got to bring that in. So now they have a button that they can push that says, okay, these are dangerously low and these are getting low.
That is a really interesting use case. Actually, during my one of my internships while I was getting my MBA, I had to create a recommended stocking list. So it was kind of similar to that in that, I guess it was in that same vein, and that you don't want a truck to be held up like a Freightliner for 2 screws that cost 75 cents, because it's like $1,000 a minute or something that they're losing in terms of value. So what you can do is start giving some of that prioritization. I really like that use case. Like it's a lot of value. I like how you made that concrete. I feel like a lot of these like talks are just vague. Yeah. You're doing a weekly LinkedIn. Is that a LinkedIn learning thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
But from what I understand, the video challenge is free for 24 hours, and then it goes back behind the paywall. Then some person has to have a subscription to LinkedIn or Lynda. Yeah.
Shameless plugs here. We're both on LinkedIn Learning.
Right. Yeah. And I have fun with that, because one way to get good with Excel is to spend the time seeing a lot of different stuff.
Mhm.
And so that's what I do. So there is the unpivoting. And then one challenge that was recent was, oh no, we have opened this spreadsheet and there's all these ref errors. All right, so
Okay.
your challenge is to look at why those ref errors are there, what the problem is, and if you can fix it. Pause the video, come back, and we'll go through it together. And the issue is the ref errors typically mean Excel was doing a calculation on something that's no longer there.
Right. So
Yeah,
yeah, like what do they call it? It's like A1 cells or something like that. Um, it's like the difference between like having a database versus like in Excel you can manually type in
yeah,
A1 reference cells. I think is what is like the
okay.
way Excel is set up. So yeah, that specific cell is no longer generating a value.
Yeah, so it was like saying, take this value, subtract it from this value, and then give me a total. But then one of those was completely deleted. So
Right.
now the final one is got a ref because it's referring to something that it can't find anymore.
So you just
And
need to go back and move that second cell wherever it was.
no, because that column was deleted, is gone.
Oh,
And
okay.
so this is a situation where it cannot be fixed.
Oh,
Yeah, and I feel like it's important to show that kind of stuff because not everything in the real world is clean and neat. It's so many times of getting some
yeah.
data and saying, I cannot work with this. There is no cleaning this up.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny. The conversation I had with George Mount a week
Hmm.
ago, he said the exact same thing of like, and I'm guilty of this in my own e-learning courses, is my data sets are pristine. They're very
Mm,
clean.
mm, mm,
Like
mm.
there needs to be more of a cleanup. I did though. I defended myself then, and I'll do it again now.
Hmm.
A lot of the data sources that I'm working with on
Hmm.
these medium to small tier organizations are relatively clean data sources.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I have had an internship at a $12 billion company, and I've seen those like really gnarly, dirty data sources,
Hmm.
and I'm not working with many of those in my
Right.
agency.
Right.
So that's an interesting conversation into itself. In
It
that
is.
like working with these, like for example, Google Analytics
Hmm.
connecting into that API, like as long as you got your tags right, like
Hmm.
you a bit, but even if you're not, tagging specific pages, that data is being tracked because that system is built out.
Hmm.
So it's just feeding a stream of data and then I can just tap into it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But then there is things like a teacher explained it to me. No, she was a journalist in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And every year, the Chicago public school system is talking about the data. The data says this school is not performing, or we need to close a school, all of this stuff. And it always the data says. And she wanted to see the data. And she kept pounding away because the school system is required to provide the data. Eventually, she gets it. And she learns the data doesn't have to be useful. It's all kind of delimiter separated stuff full of duplicates. And okay, somebody has got to clean that stuff up before she can go write a story about whether the data really says this school needs to be
Mm-hmm.
closed. Law firms, okay, we're going through a divorce. Your side is required to give me this data, but it's locked in a PDF.
Mm.
Or it's coming from 5 different sources that aren't ready to go be appended. Somebody's got to clean that up. So
That's an
that's why I
interesting
think
use case. I've never even thought about that before.
constantly that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
They got a PayPal account and 4 bank accounts, and then there's this other thing, and they were Robinhood accountant. So now, yeah, here's the data. Good luck.
Right. Well, I guess if it's a divorce, you might want to keep it as messy as
Or,
possible.
yeah. So that's one thing I think of as analysts is thinking about data cleansing and data quality as a skill. Top of mind.
Mhm.
Can I trust this data? How dirty is it? And recognizing when there is 200,000 rows of transactions, and realizing that in my case as a commissions analyst, not every transaction is going to map onto a commissions account because there's weird stuff. Yes, somebody should get commissions on this, but how much effort do I put into getting all of this cleaned up? Because I've got a deadline to meet with payroll, and then at some point we get down into like $6 transactions, and a
Right.
commissions analyst is getting 12%. You know,
Yeah, it's like a few pennies.
yeah. So how much effort do I put into cleaning that stuff up every month? Um, yeah, it's
You
not
know,
always,
I
how
had an
clean is clean enough?
I had an analogy that I used during and maybe this was like a year or two ago. I was talking about I made an analogy of the data is kind of like a crystal ball
Hmm.
in that, yeah, we would love it for it to be crystal clear and you can see everything that's going to be happening. But it's almost like a crystal ball that's set to maybe 80 or 85% opacity. So
Hmm.
you can see the outlines of what's going on, but that's good enough for you to like maneuver and make the right
Yes.
decision.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of like that analogy relates directly back to data cleansing. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, you hit a point, I don't know if it's 80%, 85%, 95%, depending on,
Yeah.
what is acceptable, where you hit a point of diminishing returns where, like you were
Yeah.
saying, that $6 of a commission that's worth, 32 cents, is that worth the time that you're paid hourly to
Right.
clean that up, to go from
Right.
95% accurate to 98%?
Right.
Because it's almost impossible to go to 100%. It's at least it's impossible to be at 100% accuracy 100% of the time.
Right. Right. And that's looking at the stakes. Right. What's at
Right.
stake here? Now, somebody who's getting $5,000 and they didn't get their 32 cents.
Right. They're not.
Right. Right. But there was a time where we started sending out termination warning letters to the wrong people.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
when things have to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to get a sense of how big this job is. And I say, okay, this is impacting 400 people. Okay, we have got to slow down and get this as clean as we can and take the time and say, okay, we know we promised to do something by Wednesday with this, but at the risk of sending out the wrong person another termination warning letter, no, we're not doing
Right.
this by Wednesday.
So yeah, it seems like that threshold
Yeah,
is
you
fluid.
got,
It's not like it
yeah,
has to be 85% accurate every single time. Like if you're looking at demand planning and you know in stock percentages, like actually one of my longest running client that I've had for 3 years, I believe that their in stock percentage, if it falls below 90%, that's when we have to give it attention and we need to, really.
mhm,
But if it's like, 96 or 95% in stock, they're fine with that. I mean, it's not, because what you're doing is you're balancing that the cost of that lost opportunity. So they walk into Lowe's and they want to buy some screws.
mhm,
That person not having, because at Lowe's it's hyper competitive. Oh, these screws are out. I'm going to go right here in the same aisle in the same, screw section and buy those. That's worth, say it's $3.98 versus the cost of getting that supply chain 100% or 98 or 99% optimized, that might be that might cost $100,000. So like, yeah, there's that balancing act of risk versus reward, and it's got to
Yeah.
be
Yes.
right in.
Yes. Yes. You got to get that really clear.
Right. That's it. I really haven't talked about data cleansing on this level with anyone before. Because yeah, I'm working with really clean.
Right.
I'm so pampered. I'm so like
right.
privileged.
And I see this time and time again, because if you go to get your degree in marketing, does it make sense to have a data cleansing course? You got to do your analysis. You got to think about all the statistics and where data is coming from and how you can write surveys to fish data out of people and all of this kind of stuff. And then I see it, somebody gets out of school and then there's all this crazy data and you're trying to get like even something as simple as first name and last names. So you got George Mount and Henrietta Burns, and then here's somebody with no first name and the last name is family of Homer J. Simpson. Okay, what do you do with family of? Okay, and then somebody they just have a first name, Rhonda. What do you do with that?
Right.
And I helped one marketing firm clean up some data, and one issue came up. Let's say there is downtown YMCA, and then there is the Henry Myrtleby Memorial YMCA. And then I realized they're the same YMCA. But then there's data about the first one about whether they have a pool or not. And then on the second one, that's where the phone number and the contact information are. So now I can't just get rid of one of them. I've got to flag them and keep a way of recognizing that these two or three are all the same, but now I got to get that data collapsed into one.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
Yes. And when you learned on clean data, I go to hackathons and the data is pristine so that the folks can get on with the hackathon. And that makes sense. But that whole data cleansing skill, it seems still is this boogeyman under the bed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like it's not such a boogeyman anymore. We talked about it in depth.
Right. No, you go under the bed and shine that flashlight and say, you get out of there. Get out of there. Yeah.
Well, it's been fantastic having you on. Are there any things you want to highlight? Any like shout outs? So you are on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Your Excel channel is
Excel on fire.
Your YouTube channel is Excel.
Yep.
I don't know what an Excel channel is. Yeah. So subscribe, like, share his stuff.
Yeah, appreciate this.
Interview.
Yeah, thank you. Great conversation. Yeah.